The phone call came at 3:47 in the morning, the kind of hour when nothing good ever happens. I was deep in sleep, dreaming about something I can't remember now, when the shrill ring cut through the darkness of my bedroom. My hand fumbled across the nightstand, knocking over a half-empty glass of water that I heard splash onto the carpet below. The cold shock of being ripped from sleep made my heart pound against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Mom's voice came through the speaker, high and trembling, barely recognizable. She was crying, the kind of crying where you can barely catch your breath between words. "Dad's had a stroke," she said. "He collapsed in the bathroom. The ambulance is here. You need to come now. Right now." The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing heavy in my chest. I could hear sirens in the background, muffled voices, the sound of something metallic clattering. The whole world tilted sideways. I threw on yesterday's jeans that were draped over my desk chair, grabbed the first shirt my hands found in the dark, and ran out into the night. The air outside was thick and humid, that heavy August heat that clings to your skin even in the middle of the night. My car was parked on the street, and I fumbled with my keys, dropping them once on the pavement where they jangled loudly in the sleeping neighborhood. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The drive to my parents' house took 17 minutes, though it felt like hours. Every red light seemed to last forever. I kept seeing Dad's face in my mind, the way he'd looked at dinner last Sunday, laughing at some joke my brother Marcus had told, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did. He'd seemed fine. Completely fine. How does someone go from fine to collapsed on a bathroom floor in less than a week? The street in front of their house was lit up like a carnival, all flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the windows of the neighboring homes. The ambulance sat in the driveway, back doors open wide, and I could see paramedics moving around inside with quick, efficient movements. I parked crooked at the curb and ran toward the house, my sneakers slapping against the concrete. Mom met me at the front door. Her face was pale, almost gray in the harsh porch light, and her eyes were red and swollen. She was still in a nightgown, a faded blue cotton thing she'd had for years, and she'd thrown Dad's old cardigan over it. She grabbed my arms when I reached her, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "He can't move his left side," she said, her voice breaking. "He can't talk right." "Oh God, Sarah, I thought he was dying. I thought I was losing him." I held her while she sobbed against my shoulder, and I could smell her lavender hand cream mixed with fierce sweat. Over her shoulder, I could see into the living room where more paramedics were working. They had Dad on a stretcher, and I caught a glimpse of his face. His left side was drooping, his mouth pulled down on that side, his eye half closed. He looked scared and confused, and when he saw me, he made a sound, a garbled attempt at my name that came out all wrong. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Mom and I followed the ambulance in my car, and she sat in the passenger seat twisting a tissue in her hands until it was just shreds. She kept talking, a constant stream of words like she couldn't stop. "He got up to use the bathroom," she said. I heard a thud. I thought maybe he'd knocked something over. But then he didn't come back. I waited and waited, and then I called his name, and he didn't answer. When I went in, he was on the floor, trying to get up but he couldn't. He couldn't move his arm. He was trying to tell me something but the words weren't working. The emergency room was bright and cold, that particular hospital cold that seems to seep into your bones. The smell hit me as soon as we walked through the automatic doors, that mix of antiseptic and floor cleaner and something else, something sick and scared. We sat in the waiting area on hard plastic chairs while they took Dad back for tests. Mom couldn't sit still. She kept standing up, pacing a few steps, sitting back down, standing up again. I got her coffee from a machine that dispensed something brown and hot that barely qualified as coffee, but she just held the cup, letting the heat burn her palms. Marcus arrived about an hour later with his wife Jennifer. My brother looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd seen him at Sunday dinner. His hair was sticking up on one side, and he was wearing his shirt inside out. Jennifer had her arm around his waist, holding him up, and her face was set in that calm, controlled expression she got when she was trying to hold everything together. They'd had to get a babysitter for the kids at 4 in the morning, she told me quietly. Their neighbor, bless her, had come right over. We waited. That's what hospitals are mostly about, I learned that night. Waiting. The clock on the wall ticked so loudly I could hear it over the murmur of voices and the occasional overhead page calling for doctors. A woman across from us was crying softly into her phone. A man in the corner had his head in his hands. Everyone in that waiting room was living through their own nightmare, and we were all suspended in this awful limbo together. A doctor finally came out at 6:30 in the morning. The sun was starting to come up outside, that early gray light filtering through the windows. Dr. Patel was young, younger than me, with kind eyes and tired lines around them. She sat down with us in a small consultation room that smelled like stale coffee and explained what they'd found. Your father has had an ischemic stroke, she said. A blood clot blocked blood flow to the left side of his brain. That's why he's experiencing right-sided weakness and speech difficulties. We've done a CT scan and an MRI. The good news is we caught it relatively early. We're starting him on medication to help dissolve the clot and prevent further damage. Mom asked 1,000 questions, her voice getting higher and more strained with each one. Will he recover? Will he be able to walk again? Will he be able to talk? Dr. Patel was patient, explaining that every stroke was different, that recovery varied from person to person. Physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, she said. It's a long road, but many patients make significant improvements. We'll know more in the coming days and weeks. They moved Dad to the stroke unit later that morning. The room was small and sterile, with machines beeping and monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. He looked so small in that hospital bed, so vulnerable. This was my father, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd scared away my nightmares when I was little, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding 3 years ago. Now he couldn't even hold a cup of water by himself. His speech was the hardest part to witness. He'd try to say something, and the words would come out jumbled, wrong, or not at all. The frustration in his eyes was terrible to see. He'd gesture with his right hand, the one that still worked, trying to communicate, and we'd all try to guess what he meant. It was like a horrible game of charades where the stakes were everything. Mom refused to leave his side. We brought her changes of clothes, food she barely touched, her reading glasses she kept forgetting she needed. She sat in that uncomfortable chair next to his bed and held his good hand, talking to him constantly. Remember when we went to the beach that summer, she'd say. Remember when the kids were little and we took that trip to the Grand Canyon. Remember our first apartment, how tiny it was, how we didn't even have a proper kitchen table. She was trying to keep him connected, trying to remind him of who he was, who they were together. I took time off work. My boss was understanding, thank God. Family emergency, I'd said, and she told me to take whatever time I needed. My husband David came by the hospital every evening after work, bringing dinner for all of us, sitting quietly in the corner, being supportive in that steady way he had. He'd squeeze my shoulder when he walked past, bring me coffee, ask if I needed anything. I loved him for knowing when to talk and when to just be there. The first week was the hardest. Dad was confused, agitated sometimes. The nurses said it was normal, that stroke patients often went through this. He'd try to get out of bed and couldn't understand why his leg wouldn't work. He'd get angry, making frustrated sounds that broke my heart. The speech therapist came every day, working with him on simple words. Yes. No. Water. Help. Each word was a battle. But then, slowly, things started to improve. By the end of the second week, he could say a few words clearly. Mom. Sarah. Marcus. His name, Robert. The physical therapist had him doing exercises, trying to regain strength in his left side. It was exhausting to watch, the effort it took him to do things that had been automatic his whole life. Lifting his arm. Squeezing a ball. Moving his fingers. They moved him to a rehabilitation facility after 3 weeks in the hospital. It was a nicer place than I'd expected, with big windows and plants in the common areas, but it still smelled like institution. That mix of cleaning products and cafeteria food and too many people living too close together. Dad had a roommate, an older man named Frank who'd had a stroke 6 months earlier and was doing much better. Frank could walk with a cane, could speak clearly, and he became a kind of inspiration for Dad. See, Mom would say, "That's going to be you. You're going to get better just like Frank." We fell into a routine. Mom was there every day from morning until evening. Marcus and I would alternate visits, one of us coming in the morning, the other in the evening, so Dad always had family around. Jennifer would bring the kids on weekends, and seeing his grandchildren seemed to energize Dad in a way nothing else did. 5-year-old Emma would climb carefully onto his bed and show him her drawings. 8-year-old Tyler would tell him about soccer practice, about school, about the new video game he was playing. Dad would listen, his good hand resting on Tyler's head, his eyes bright with love even when he couldn't find the words to respond. The bills started coming about a month in. Even with insurance, the costs were staggering. Hospital stay, specialists, medications, rehabilitation facility, therapies. Mom tried to hide how worried she was, but I saw her going through papers late at night when she thought no one was looking, saw the way her hands shook when she opened envelopes. Marcus and I sat down with her one evening in the facility's family lounge, a depressing little room with worn furniture and outdated magazines. "We need to talk about money," Marcus said gently. Mom's face crumpled. "I don't know what we're going to do," she admitted. "Your father's disability insurance covers some of it, but not enough. Not nearly enough. We have savings, but at this rate, it'll be gone in a few months. And he can't work. He might never be able to work again." Marcus and I promised to help. "We'd figure it out together," we said. "We're family." But I saw the worry in Marcus's eyes too. He and Jennifer had 2 kids, a mortgage, student loans still hanging over them. David and I were in better shape financially, but we'd been saving for a house, hoping to start our own family soon. Still, this was Dad. You don't think about money when your father's life is on the line. Dad came home after 2 months. The house had to be modified. We installed grab bars in the bathroom, got a shower chair, moved his and Mom's bedroom downstairs to the guest room because he couldn't manage stairs yet. A hospital bed was delivered, along with a walker and a wheelchair for when he got tired. The living room started to look like a medical supply store. Home health aides came 3 times a week. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. The house was constantly full of strangers, well-meaning professionals who were there to help but whose presence was a constant reminder that nothing was normal anymore. Dad hated it. I could see it in his eyes, the humiliation of needing help to shower, to dress, to do basic things he'd done by himself for 62 years. But he was improving. By month 3, he could walk short distances with the walker. His speech was getting clearer, though he still struggled with longer sentences and sometimes couldn't find the word he wanted. He'd get frustrated, snap at Mom, then feel terrible about it. She'd forgive him every time, patient in a way I'd never fully appreciated before. "This is the sickness," she'd tell him. "Not you. I know you. This isn't you." I started noticing small things that seemed off around month 4. Little inconsistencies. One afternoon I came by and found Dad in the kitchen, reaching up to get a mug from the cabinet with his left hand, the supposedly weak one. When he saw me, he quickly switched to his right hand, but I'd seen it. The movement had been smooth, natural, not the labored effort I'd watched him struggle with in therapy. Another time, I arrived early for a visit and heard him talking to Mom in the bedroom. His speech was clear, completely clear, no hesitation or searching for words. But when I walked in, he immediately started speaking in that halting, effortful way he'd been using for months. I told myself I was imagining things. Stroke recovery wasn't linear, the doctors had said. Patients had good days and bad days. But then Marcus mentioned something similar. He'd called the house one evening and Dad had answered the phone. Marcus said Dad's voice had sounded almost normal, that they'd had a brief conversation before Dad suddenly seemed to remember he was supposed to have trouble speaking. It was weird, Marcus told me over coffee one Saturday morning while our spouses were at the farmer's market. His voice changed mid-conversation. Like he caught himself. We didn't want to believe what we were thinking. It was too awful, too impossible. Why would anyone fake a stroke? The suffering we'd all been through, the fear, the exhaustion, the money. God, the money. Mom and Dad had burned through their savings. Marcus and Jennifer had taken out a loan. David and I had emptied our house fund. All of it going to medical bills, to modifications, to care. I decided to test my suspicion, though it made me feel sick to even consider it. I started dropping by unannounced, at random times. Early morning, late evening, middle of the afternoon. And I started to see more. Dad using his left hand when he thought no one was watching. Walking without the walker when he didn't know I could see him through the window. Speaking clearly to someone on the phone, then hanging up and reverting to his impaired speech when Mom came into the room. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in late November. I'd told Mom I'd be by around 3, but I finished my errands early and arrived at 2:15 instead. I used my key to let myself in quietly, not wanting to wake Dad if he was napping. The house was warm, almost too warm, and I could smell the pot roast Mom had cooking in the slow cooker for dinner. I heard voices coming from the den, Dad's voice, and someone else's. A woman's voice I didn't recognize. I walked quietly down the hall, my footsteps muffled by the carpet runner Mom had put down to help Dad with his walker. The den door was half open, and I could see inside. Dad was sitting in his recliner, no walker in sight. He was talking on his cell phone, and his voice was completely normal. Crystal clear. No hesitation, no word-finding difficulties, no slurring. "I'm telling you, Linda," he was saying, "it's working perfectly. They don't suspect a thing. I've got them all running around taking care of me, and the sympathy is incredible. You should see how guilty Sarah looks every time she visits. Like she hasn't done enough." My blood turned to ice. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. Linda. I knew that name. Linda Castellano. Dad's business partner from 20 years ago. The woman Mom had always been suspicious of, though Dad had sworn there was nothing between them. The woman who disappeared from our lives when Dad had left that business partnership under circumstances he'd never fully explained. "I've got at least another few months before I'll have to stage a miraculous recovery," Dad continued. "By then, I'll have milked this for everything it's worth. The kids have been so generous, bless their hearts. And Margaret, God, she's been waiting on me hand and foot. I haven't had to lift a finger in months. It's almost too easy." The woman on the phone said something I couldn't hear, and Dad laughed. Actually laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in months. "Oh, don't worry about the money," he said. "I've got it all worked out. The insurance payout, the disability, plus what the kids have been contributing. I've been moving it into that account we set up. Margaret doesn't know about it. Nobody knows. By the time I make my miraculous recovery, we'll have enough to disappear properly. Start over somewhere warm. Maybe Arizona. You'd like Arizona." I must have made a sound, some small gasp or movement, because Dad's head whipped around toward the door. Our eyes met, and I watched his face transform. First shock, his eyes going wide, his mouth falling open. Then calculation, his mind clearly racing through options. And finally, he settled on his stroke face, that drooping, confused expression he'd been wearing for months. "Sarah," he said, his voice suddenly thick and slurred. "When did you get here? I didn't hear you come in." But it was too late. I'd heard everything. Seen everything. The mask had slipped, and there was no putting it back on. I walked into the den, my legs feeling like they might give out under me. My whole body was shaking, adrenaline and rage and heartbreak all mixing together into something that made me feel like I might throw up. "I heard you," I said, and my voice came out cold and flat, not sounding like my own voice at all. "I heard everything. The phone call. Linda. All of it." Dad's face went through another series of changes. He tried to maintain the stroke symptoms for a moment longer, but something in my eyes must have told him it was pointless. Slowly, his face returned to normal. His left side lifted. His mouth straightened. He looked like himself again, completely himself, and it was the most horrible thing I'd ever seen. "Sarah," he started, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to explain this away." He stood up from the recliner, no weakness, no struggle, just stood up like a normal, healthy man. "Sarah, honey, listen to me," he said, and his voice was pleading now, desperate. "You don't understand. Your mother, she's been suffocating me for years. This marriage, this life, it's been killing me slowly. I needed a way out." "A way out," I repeated, and I could hear my voice rising, getting louder. "You needed a way out, so you faked a stroke? You put us through hell?" You let Mom think you were dying? You took our money, our time, our hearts, and you just played us all. It's not that simple, he said, taking a step toward me. I backed away, holding up both hands now like I could physically push away the reality of what was happening. It's complicated, he continued. You don't know what it's been like, living with your mother all these years. The nagging, the control, the way she has to manage every aspect of my life. So you tortured her, I said. You tortured all of us. Do you have any idea what these months have been like? Mom hasn't slept more than a few hours a night since this started. She's aged 10 years. Marcus had to take out a loan. David and I gave up our house fund. We were going to start trying for a baby, but we put it off because we needed to help you. And you were just, laughing at us the whole time. I wasn't laughing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I was surviving. Making a plan for my future. I'm 62 years old, Sarah. How many good years do I have left? I deserve to be happy. The sound that came out of me was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. You deserve to be happy, I said. What about what Mom deserves? What about what we deserve? We're your family. We love you. We would have done anything for you. And this is how you repay that love? I heard the front door open, heard Mom's voice calling out that she was home from the grocery store. Dad's face went pale. Sarah, please, he said, his voice urgent now. Don't tell her. Not yet. Let me figure out how to handle this. Give me a few days. Give you a few days, I said, and I felt something hard and cold settle in my chest. Give you a few days to what? Come up with more lies? Fake a few more symptoms? Steal a little more money? Mom appeared in the doorway, her arms full of grocery bags. She looked at Dad standing there, no walker, no weakness, and her face went confused. Robert, she said. You're standing. Without your walker. Her voice was full of hope, innocent hope that made me want to scream. Are you feeling better today? I watched Dad's face, watched him make the decision. He could come clean right now, tell the truth, face the consequences. Or he could keep lying. I saw the moment he chose the lie. His face started to droop again, his left side sagging, and he reached for the walker that was leaning against the wall. Just for a moment, he said, his voice slurring again. Felt a bit stronger. But I'm tired now. Very tired. Mom's face lit up with joy. Oh, Robert, she said, setting down the grocery bags and rushing to his side. That's wonderful. That's such good progress. Let me help you back to your chair. I couldn't watch it. Couldn't stand there and watch him lie to her face, watch her believe him, watch her hope. I turned and walked out of the den, down the hall, out the front door. I got in my car and drove, not knowing where I was going, just needing to move, to get away from that house and the horrible truth it contained. I ended up at Marcus's house. Jennifer answered the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. Marcus was in the living room, helping Tyler with homework, but he stood up when he saw me. Sarah, what's wrong? He asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. I told them everything. Every word of Dad's phone conversation, every detail of what I'd witnessed. They sat on the couch, Jennifer's hand over her mouth, Marcus's face getting redder and redder as I talked. When I finished, there was a long silence. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, could hear the kids playing upstairs, normal sounds in a world that had just stopped being normal. "That son of a bitch," Marcus finally said, his voice low and dangerous. "That absolute son of a bitch." Jennifer put her hand on his arm, but he shook it off, standing up and starting to pace. "We took out a loan," he said. "A $20,000 loan. We're going to be paying it off for years." And he was just, what, playing pretend? Playing sick? "We have to tell Mom," I said, though the thought of it made me feel sick. "She has to know." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so much like Dad it made my heart hurt. "How do we tell her this?" he asked. "It'll destroy her. Their whole marriage, everything she thought she knew about him, it's all a lie." "She deserves to know the truth," Jennifer said quietly. She'd been silent until now, but her voice was firm. "You can't let her keep living in this lie. It's not fair to her." "And what happens when he decides to make his miraculous recovery and run off with this Linda woman?" "Margaret will be left with nothing, not even the truth." "We need proof," Marcus said, his mind clearly working through the problem. "If we confront him, he'll just deny it. We need evidence. Something concrete." "I have an idea," I said slowly. It was forming in my mind even as I spoke. "We set up cameras. Hidden cameras in the house. Catch him on video when he thinks no one's watching. Get him talking on the phone again, or just moving around normally. Something Mom can't deny, something he can't explain away." Marcus nodded slowly. "I know a guy who does security systems," he said. "He owes me a favor. I can have cameras installed tomorrow when Mom takes Dad to his therapy appointment. Small ones, hidden. She'll never know they're there." "This feels wrong," I said, even as I agreed to it. "Spying on our own parents." "He's the one who made it wrong," Marcus said, and his voice was hard. "We're just finding out the truth." The next day, while Mom drove Dad to his physical therapy appointment, Marcus and his friend installed 4 small cameras in the house. One in the den, one in the kitchen, one in the living room, one in the master bedroom. They were tiny things, no bigger than a button, hidden in picture frames and smoke detectors and the bookshelf. They fed to an app on our phones, recording everything. For 2 days, we watched. It was excruciating, seeing our father through this lens, waiting for him to slip up. Mom was in and out, running errands, going to her book club, visiting her sister. And every time she left, Dad transformed. He'd wait until he heard her car pull out of the driveway, and then he'd get up from wherever he was sitting, no walker, no weakness, and move around the house like a normal person. We watched him make himself lunch, using both hands perfectly. Watched him talk on the phone to Linda, discussing their plans, laughing about how well the deception was working. Watched him count money, actual stacks of cash he had hidden in his den, money he'd been skimming from the accounts we'd set up to help with his medical expenses. The worst was watching him practice. Actually practice his stroke symptoms in front of the mirror in the bedroom. He'd stand there, making his face droop, slurring his words, testing different levels of impairment. It was like watching an actor rehearse, except the role he was playing was destroying his family. On the 3rd day, we had enough. Hours of footage, undeniable proof. Marcus and I sat in his car outside our parents' house, trying to gather the courage to go inside. Jennifer had offered to come, but we'd told her no. This was family business, ugly family business, and we needed to handle it ourselves. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked me. Once we do this, there's no going back. Everything changes. It already changed, I said. We just didn't know it yet. We found Mom in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The smell of garlic and tomatoes filled the air, and she was humming softly to herself, some old song from when she and Dad were young. She looked happy, content, and I hated that we were about to shatter that contentment into a million pieces. Mom, I said, and something in my voice made her turn around, the wooden spoon still in her hand. We need to talk. All of us. Where's Dad? He's resting in the den, she said, her face creasing with concern. What's wrong? Is everything okay? No, Marcus said. Everything is not okay. Can you get Dad? We need to have a family meeting. Mom's concern deepened, but she nodded, setting down the spoon and wiping her hands on her apron. She walked toward the den, and Marcus and I followed. Dad was in his recliner, watching television, the picture of a recovering stroke patient. When he saw Marcus and me, his eyes narrowed slightly. He knew. Somehow, he knew this was it. Robert, Mom said. The kids want to talk to us. She sat down on the couch, and Marcus and I remained standing. Dad stayed in his recliner, his face already arranging itself into that drooping, sympathetic expression. What's this about? He asked, his voice carefully slurred. I pulled out my phone. Marcus did the same. We'd both loaded the most damning footage, ready to play it. Dad, I said, and my voice was shaking despite my efforts to keep it steady. We know. We know everything. Know what? Mom asked, looking between us, confused. What's going on? Instead of answering, I hit play on the video. It showed Dad, just yesterday, walking around the kitchen making himself a sandwich. Both hands working perfectly, no weakness, no tremor. Moving with complete ease and coordination. Mom leaned forward, squinting at the screen, not understanding what she was seeing at first. I don't understand, she said. When was this taken? Robert, you're walking. You're using both hands. Marcus played his video. This one had audio. Dad on the phone with Linda, talking about their plans, about the money, about how easy it had been to fool everyone. Mom's face went white as she listened. She looked from the phone to Dad, then back to the phone, like she couldn't reconcile what she was seeing and hearing with the man sitting in front of her. Robert, she said, and her voice was very small. What is this? What am I watching? Dad's face had gone through several changes during the videos. Shock, fear, anger, and finally, resignation. He sat up straighter in the recliner, and as we watched, his face returned to normal. The droop disappeared. The weakness vanished. He looked like himself, healthy and whole, and Mom made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. Margaret, he started, but she held up her hand, the same gesture I'd used with him days before. Don't, she said. Her voice was different now, harder than I'd ever heard it. Don't you dare speak to me right now. She stood up from the couch, and I could see her whole body trembling. She walked over to him, and for a moment I thought she might hit him. Instead, she just stared down at him, this man she'd been married to for 37 years, this man she'd devoted the last 5 months to caring for, and her face was full of something I'd never seen there before. Not just anger, not just hurt, but a kind of cold, clear understanding. You faked it, she said. All of it. the stroke, the weakness, the speech problems. All of it was a lie. Dad opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I could see him trying to find the right words, the right explanation that would make this okay. But there were no words. No explanation that could make this anything other than what it was. How long? Mom asked. How long have you been planning this? Dad's shoulders slumped. 6 months, he said quietly. Maybe longer. I met Linda again at a conference last year. We started talking, and I realized I wanted out. Out of this marriage, out of this life. But I couldn't just leave. You'd get half of everything in a divorce. I'd lose the house, the retirement accounts, everything I'd worked for. So I came up with a plan. A plan, Mom repeated, and she laughed, a harsh, bitter sound I'd never heard from her before. You came up with a plan to torture your family. To make us think you were dying. To take our money, our time, our love, and use it all to fund your escape with your mistress. She's not my mistress, Dad said, and even in that moment, even caught in his lies, he was trying to defend himself. We haven't done anything inappropriate. We're just friends who want a chance at happiness. You called an ambulance, Mom said, and her voice was rising now. You lay on the bathroom floor and made me think you were dying. I thought I was losing you. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Do you have any concept of the fear, the grief, the absolute terror I felt? I'm sorry, Dad said, but the words were hollow, meaningless. I never meant to hurt you. You never meant to hurt me, Mom said. You faked a stroke. You let me bathe you, dress you, feed you. You let me sleep in a chair next to your bed for weeks because I was afraid you'd need something in the night. You took money from our children, money they needed for their own lives, their own futures. And you never meant to hurt us? Marcus stepped forward. Where's the money, Dad? He asked. All the money we gave you, the insurance payouts, the disability. Where is it? Dad was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, in an account. Under a different name. I was going to use it to start over. You're going to give it back, Marcus said. Every penny. And then you're going to figure out how to make this right, though I have no idea how you possibly could. I can't give it all back, Dad said. Some of it's already spent. The account set up fees, some expenses. Then you'll sell something, I said. The boat you never use. Your golf clubs. Your coin collection. I don't care what you have to do, but you're going to return every dollar you stole from this family. Mom had moved away from Dad, backing up until she was against the wall, as far from him as she could get in the small room. I want you out, she said. Her voice was steady now, cold and clear. I want you out of this house tonight. Margaret, please, Dad said, standing up from the recliner. Let's talk about this. Let's figure this out together. Together, Mom said, and she laughed that bitter laugh again. There is no together. There hasn't been a together for months, apparently. You've been planning your exit while I've been planning your recovery. You've been stealing from us while we've been sacrificing for you. No. There is no together anymore. Where am I supposed to go? Dad asked, and there was a whine in his voice now, a petulance that made me sick. Call Linda, Marcus said coldly. I'm sure she'll take you in. That's what you wanted anyway, right? To run away with her? Well, congratulations. You're free. You got your wish. The kids, Dad said, looking at me and Marcus. You have to understand. I was suffocating. Your mother, she's been controlling every aspect of my life for years. I needed out. Don't you dare try to make this Mom's fault, I said, and I could feel tears burning in my eyes, angry tears that I refused to let fall. Don't you dare try to justify what you did. If you were unhappy, you could have talked to her. You could have suggested counseling. You could have asked for a divorce like a normal person. But instead, you chose to fake a medical emergency and manipulate everyone who loves you. That's not on Mom. That's on you. Dad looked at each of us in turn, and I could see him realizing that there was no way out of this, no words that would fix what he'd broken. His face crumpled, and he started to cry. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. Please, please forgive me. But his tears felt as fake as his stroke had been. I couldn't trust anything about him anymore. Every emotion, every word, every gesture was suspect now. How could we ever believe anything he said again? Mom walked out of the den. We heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard her moving around in the bedroom above us. She came back down 10 minutes later with 2 suitcases, packed with Dad's clothes. She set them down in the hallway with a heavy thud. There, she said. That should be enough for now. You can get the rest of your things later, when I'm not here. Margaret, please, Dad tried again, but she cut him off. I said I want you out. If you're not gone in the next 10 minutes, I'm calling the police. I'll tell them you've been committing fraud, stealing from your family, faking a disability to collect insurance money. I'm sure they'd be very interested in that. Dad's face went pale. You wouldn't, he said. Try me, Mom said, and her voice was like steel. I have spent 5 months of my life caring for a man who didn't need care. I have given up my time, my energy, my peace of mind. I have watched my children sacrifice their futures to help their father. And all of it, every single moment, was based on a lie. So yes, Robert, I absolutely would call the police. And I'd enjoy doing it. Dad looked at Marcus and me, maybe hoping we'd intervene, but we just stared back at him. There was nothing we could say, nothing we wanted to say. He'd made his choices. Now he had to live with the consequences. He picked up the suitcases, moving slowly toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back one more time. I really am sorry, he said. I know you don't believe me, but I am. I never wanted it to go this far. But it did go this far, Mom said. And now you have to leave. We watched him walk out to his car, load the suitcases into the trunk, and drive away. The taillights disappeared down the street, and then he was gone. Just like that. 5 months of hell, and he was just gone. Mom stood at the window, watching until she couldn't see the car anymore. Then she turned around, and her face was blank, empty, like someone had erased everything that made her her. She walked past Marcus and me without a word, went into the kitchen, and turned off the stove where dinner had been cooking. The smell of burned tomato sauce filled the air. Mom, I said, following her. Are you okay? She turned to look at me, and I saw that her eyes were dry. No tears, no emotion, just a kind of hollow exhaustion. Am I okay? She repeated. I don't know, Sarah. I don't know what I am. Marcus came into the kitchen. We're going to stay with you tonight, he said. Jennifer's bringing the kids over. You shouldn't be alone. Mom nodded slowly. Okay, she said. That would be nice. We ordered pizza because none of us could face cooking. Jennifer arrived with Emma and Tyler, who were confused about why they were having a sleepover at Grandma's on a school night but excited nonetheless. We didn't tell them what had happened. They were too young to understand, too young to have their image of their grandfather shattered like ours had been. After the kids were in bed, the four of us sat in the living room. Mom was in Dad's recliner, the chair he'd spent so many months pretending to be weak in, and she looked small in it, diminished. Jennifer made tea that no one drank. Marcus kept getting up and pacing, too angry to sit still. I just sat on the couch, feeling numb, like my emotions had been turned off. I should have known, Mom said finally, breaking the silence. There were signs. Little things that didn't quite add up. But I didn't want to see them. I wanted to believe he was getting better. I wanted to believe in his recovery, in us, in our marriage. This isn't your fault, Jennifer said firmly. You trusted your husband. That's what you're supposed to do in a marriage. He's the one who betrayed that trust. 37 years, Mom said, and her voice was wondering, like she couldn't quite believe it. 37 years of marriage, and I didn't really know him at all. How is that possible? How do you spend that much of your life with someone and not know they're capable of something like this? People hide things, Marcus said. They show you what they want you to see. But this wasn't just hiding something, Mom said. This was elaborate. Calculated. He planned this for months. He researched stroke symptoms. He practiced them. He committed to this lie every single day for 5 months. That takes a level of deception I can't even comprehend. She was right. The more I thought about it, the more horrifying it became. Every therapy session Dad had attended, he'd been acting. Every time he'd struggled with a word or fumbled with his left hand, it had been a performance. Every moment of frustration, every tear, every small victory we'd celebrated, all of it had been fake. What do we do now? I asked. Do we tell people? The doctors, the therapists, the insurance company? We have to, Marcus said. He committed fraud. He collected disability payments, insurance money, all under false pretenses. That's illegal. But if we report him, he could go to jail, I said. The thought made me feel sick, even after everything he'd done. He's still our father. He stopped being our father when he decided to do this, Marcus said, his voice hard. He made his choice. Now we have to make ours. Mom was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I need to talk to a lawyer. Figure out my options. Divorce, obviously. But also the financial aspects. If he's been hiding money, moving assets, I need to know what I'm entitled to. And yes, we need to report the fraud. Not because I want to see him punished, though God knows he deserves it, but because it's the right thing to do. He stole from insurance companies, from disability programs. That affects everyone. We'll help you, Jennifer said. Whatever you need. We're here. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and police reports and insurance investigators. The story came out in pieces. Dad had been planning this for over a year, not 6 months like he'd initially admitted. He'd met Linda at a conference, and they'd rekindled whatever relationship they'd had decades ago. She was divorced, financially comfortable, and willing to start a new life with him. But Dad didn't want to split his assets in a divorce. He'd worked hard for his retirement savings, his pension, his investments. So he'd come up with this plan. Fake a stroke, collect the insurance money and disability payments, let his family contribute financially out of love and guilt, and then make a miraculous recovery and disappear with Linda and the money. The night he'd collapsed in the bathroom hadn't been a stroke at all. He'd taken medication to temporarily mimic stroke symptoms, something he'd researched extensively online. The doctors had seen what they expected to see, a man presenting with stroke symptoms, and they treated him accordingly. The scans had shown some minor abnormalities, normal for a man his age, but nothing that indicated a major stroke. Still, combined with his symptoms, they'd made the diagnosis. And then Dad had just kept up the act. Day after day, week after week, month after month. It must have been exhausting, I thought. Constantly monitoring himself, making sure he never slipped up, always remembering which hand was supposed to be weak, how his speech was supposed to sound. But he'd done it. He'd committed to the lie completely. The insurance company was furious. They'd paid out over $100,000 in claims. The disability insurance had been sending monthly checks. All of it obtained fraudulently. They wanted to prosecute, and they had every right to. The police were building a case for fraud, theft, and insurance fraud. Dad tried to call Mom several times in those first weeks. She never answered. He tried to call Marcus and me too. Marcus blocked his number immediately. I listened to one voicemail, heard Dad's voice, now perfectly clear and normal, begging for a chance to explain, to make things right. I deleted it and blocked his number too. Mom filed for divorce. Her lawyer was a sharp woman named Patricia who'd handled plenty of messy divorces and wasn't impressed by Dad's attempts to hide assets. She found the secret account, found evidence of other accounts Dad had opened, found transfers he'd made over the past year. It turned out he'd been siphoning money from their joint accounts for months, small amounts that Mom hadn't noticed, building up his escape fund. The house was in both their names, but Mom's lawyer argued that Dad had forfeited any right to it through his fraud. The retirement accounts would be split, but Mom would get the larger share as compensation for the emotional distress and financial damage Dad had caused. It wasn't about the money for Mom, I don't think. It was about justice. About making sure he didn't get to just walk away from this without consequences. Linda, it turned out, wanted nothing to do with Dad once the truth came out. She claimed she hadn't known about the fake stroke, that Dad had told her he was separated from Mom and planning a divorce. When she found out what he'd really done, she cut off all contact. So Dad ended up alone, living in a cheap apartment across town, facing criminal charges and a divorce that would leave him with a fraction of what he'd hoped to keep. Marcus and I had to testify to the insurance investigators, had to hand over the videos we'd taken, had to recount every detail of those 5 months. It was painful, reliving it all, but also cathartic in a way. Every time I told the story, it became a little more real, a little less like a nightmare I might wake up from. The hardest part was explaining it to Emma and Tyler. They kept asking where Grandpa was, why he didn't come to visit anymore. Marcus and Jennifer tried to keep it simple. Grandpa made some bad choices, they said. He hurt people, and now he has to face the consequences. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes too. But Emma, smart little Emma, asked the question that cut right to the heart of it. Doesn't Grandpa love us anymore? She asked, her big eyes full of confusion and hurt. Marcus had to leave the room. I saw his face crumple as he walked away, and Jennifer pulled Emma onto her lap. "Grandpa loves you very much," Jennifer said, though I could hear the strain in her voice, the effort it took to say those words. "But sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they love. That doesn't mean the love wasn't real. It just means the choices were wrong." I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know if Dad had ever really loved us, or if we'd all just been props in the story of his life, useful until we weren't. How do you love someone and do what he did? How do you watch your children sacrifice their futures for you and not feel enough guilt to stop the lie? Mom started therapy. She needed help processing the betrayal, the grief, the anger. Because it was grief, she told me one afternoon as we sat in her kitchen drinking coffee. "I'm grieving the man I thought I was married to. That man never existed. The real Robert, the one who could do something like this, I never knew him at all. So I'm grieving a ghost, a fiction, and that's a strange kind of loss." She was stronger than I'd given her credit for. I'd always seen her as soft, gentle, someone who needed protecting. But watching her navigate the divorce, the legal proceedings, the reconstruction of her life, I saw steel in her I'd never noticed before. She'd been strong all along. She'd just never needed to show it. The trial happened in the spring, almost a year after that terrible phone call in the middle of the night. Dad pleaded guilty to insurance fraud and theft. His lawyer had advised him that fighting it was pointless given the evidence against him. The videos alone were damning, but there was also the testimony from Marcus and me, the financial records, the phone records showing his calls to Linda. The judge was not sympathetic. She'd seen the evidence, heard the testimonies, and she was clearly disgusted. "You didn't just defraud insurance companies," she told Dad. "You defrauded your own family. You exploited their love, their trust, their willingness to sacrifice for you. You caused immeasurable emotional harm to people who cared about you. That shows a level of callousness and selfishness that this court cannot overlook." Dad was sentenced to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. He was also ordered to pay restitution to the insurance companies, to return all the money he'd taken from Marcus and me, and to cover Mom's legal fees. By the time it was all calculated, he'd be paying it off for the rest of his life. I watched him being led away in handcuffs, this man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd walked me down the aisle, who'd been my hero when I was little. He looked old suddenly, older than his 63 years, his shoulders slumped, his face gray. He glanced back once, his eyes finding mine in the courtroom, and I saw something there. Regret, maybe. Or just self-pity. I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't trust my ability to read him. Marcus didn't come to the sentencing. He couldn't, he said. Couldn't stand to be in the same room with Dad, couldn't stand to hear him try to apologize or explain or justify. I understood. Some betrayals are too deep to face directly. Some wounds need distance to even begin to heal. Mom sold the house. Too many memories, she said. Too many ghosts. She bought a smaller place, a condo near the water with big windows and a balcony where she could watch the sunrise. She started painting, something she'd always wanted to do but never had time for. She joined a book club, made new friends, women who didn't know her as Robert's wife but just as Margaret, a person in her own right. She seemed lighter somehow, despite everything. Like she'd been carrying a weight for years and had finally set it down. I asked her about it once, how she could seem so okay after such a devastating betrayal. She thought about it for a long time before answering. "I think I've been unhappy for a long time," she said. but I didn't let myself acknowledge it. I'd made a commitment, taken vows, and I was going to honor them no matter what. Even when your father was dismissive, controlling, critical, I told myself that's just how marriage was. You work through the hard times. You don't give up. But the truth is, I'd given up on myself. I'd made myself smaller and smaller to fit into the life he wanted. And when he did this terrible thing, when he blew up our marriage in the most spectacular way possible, he actually freed me. He gave me permission to stop trying, to stop pretending, to stop sacrificing myself for a relationship that wasn't making either of us happy. Do you think he was unhappy too? I asked. Is that why he did it? Mom shook her head. I think your father is someone who's never satisfied, she said. Always looking for the next thing, the better thing, the thing that will finally make him happy. But happiness doesn't work that way. It's not something you find outside yourself. It's something you build, day by day, with the choices you make and the way you treat people. Your father never learned that. He thought happiness was something he could take, something he could manipulate his way into. And look where it got him. Marcus and Jennifer used the money Dad paid back to them to take the kids on a trip to Disney World. They needed something positive, something to replace the bad memories with good ones. The photos they sent showed Emma and Tyler grinning in front of the castle, hugging Mickey Mouse, their faces painted and their eyes bright with joy. Kids are resilient, Jennifer told me. They'll be okay. They'll remember Grandpa, but it won't define them. David and I started trying for a baby. We'd put it off for so long, first because of Dad's fake stroke, then because of the emotional aftermath, the legal proceedings, the family chaos. But life had to go on. We couldn't let Dad's choices steal our future too. I got pregnant in the fall, and when I told Mom, she cried. Happy tears this time, tears of joy and hope and new beginnings. I thought about telling Dad. He was in prison, and I had the right to visit, to write, to maintain contact if I wanted. But I didn't want to. I didn't want him to know about my baby, didn't want him to have any claim to this new life I was creating. He'd forfeited his right to be part of our family when he'd chosen to betray us so completely. Marcus felt the same way. He'd cut Dad out of his life entirely, refused to speak about him, acted as if he'd never existed. It was his way of coping, of protecting himself and his family from further hurt. I couldn't blame him. We all had to find our own way through this. But sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd think about Dad in his prison cell. I'd wonder if he understood what he'd lost. Not just his freedom, his money, his comfortable life, but his family. His children who'd loved him. His grandchildren who'd adored him. His wife who'd devoted decades to him. All of it gone, sacrificed for a plan that had failed spectacularly. Did he regret it? Really regret it, not just regret getting caught? Did he lie awake at night thinking about what he'd done, feeling the weight of his choices? Or did he still justify it to himself, still find ways to blame Mom, to blame circumstances, to blame anything but his own selfishness and cruelty? I'd never know. And maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't need to know. Maybe understanding him wasn't necessary for my own healing. The baby came in the summer, a little girl we named Claire. She had David's eyes and my nose and a full head of dark hair that stuck straight up no matter what we did. Mom was there for the birth, holding my hand, crying happy tears when Claire took her first breath and let out that indignant newborn wail. "This is what matters," Mom whispered to me as I held my daughter for the first time. "This. Family. Real love. Not the fake kind, not the manipulative kind, but this. The real thing. Marcus and Jennifer came to meet Claire the next day, bringing Emma and Tyler, who were fascinated by their tiny new cousin. Emma wanted to hold her immediately, sitting very still and serious on the hospital bed with Claire in her arms. "She's so small," Emma whispered, like she was afraid of breaking her. Tyler was less interested, more concerned with the buttons on the hospital bed that made it go up and down, but he did lean in to look at Claire's face and declared her okay for a baby. "We took pictures, lots of pictures. For generations," Mom said, looking at a photo of her holding Claire. "Your grandmother would have loved to meet her." My grandmother had passed away years ago, but I knew what Mom meant. The continuity of family, the passing down of love and stories and traditions. Claire would grow up knowing her grandmother, her uncle and aunt, her cousins. She'd grow up in a family that had been broken and had found a way to heal. She wouldn't know her grandfather. Not the real one, anyway. Maybe someday we'd tell her about him, about what he'd done. Or maybe we wouldn't. Maybe some stories didn't need to be passed down. Maybe some legacies were better left buried. Dad sent a letter when he found out about Claire's birth. Someone must have told him, maybe a mutual friend who didn't know the whole story. The letter arrived at my house, forwarded from Mom's old address. I held it for a long time, feeling the weight of it, before I opened it. The handwriting was Dad's, that familiar scrawl I'd seen on birthday cards and notes on the fridge my whole life. "Dear Sarah," it started. "I heard you had a baby girl. Congratulations. I wish I could meet her. I wish I could be there for you. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, no right to be part of your life anymore. What I did was unforgivable. I see that now. I destroyed everything good in my life because I was selfish and stupid and convinced myself I deserved something I hadn't earned. I think about you and Marcus every day. I think about your mother. I think about what I had and what I threw away. Prison gives you a lot of time to think, and I've done nothing but think for months now. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. But I am. I'm so sorry." I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't look at it again. Maybe his regret was real. Maybe he really had come to understand what he'd done. But it didn't change anything. It didn't undo the months of lies, the betrayal, the pain he'd caused. Sorry was just a word, and words were cheap. Dad had proven that. David found me sitting in Claire's nursery that evening, just watching her sleep in her crib. "You okay?" he asked, coming to stand beside me, his arm around my waist. "I got a letter from Dad," I said. "He's sorry. He wants to meet Claire." David was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "I don't want to do anything. He made his choices. Now I'm making mine. Claire deserves to grow up surrounded by people who love her honestly, who show up for her, who don't manipulate or lie or betray. Dad doesn't get to be part of that." David kissed the top of my head. "Okay," he said. "That's okay." And it was okay. It had to be okay. Because life was moving forward, with or without Dad. Claire was growing, changing every day. Marcus's kids were getting older, Emma starting middle school, Tyler getting into sports. Mom was thriving in her new life, dating even, though she said she was in no hurry to get serious with anyone. We were healing, slowly, building new memories to replace the painful ones. The first Christmas without Dad was strange. We'd always spent it at my parents' house, the whole family gathered around the tree, Dad playing Santa, handing out gifts with that booming laugh of his. But that Dad, the one from my memories, had never really existed. Or maybe he had, and he'd changed. Or maybe I'd just never seen him clearly. We spent Christmas at Mom's new condo instead. It was smaller, cozier, and Mom had decorated it beautifully. A tree by the window, lights strung along the balcony, the smell of cinnamon and pine filling the air. We cooked together, all of us crowded in her little kitchen, and it was chaotic and loud and perfect. Emma and Tyler were old enough now to understand more of what had happened. Not all of it, but enough. They knew Grandpa had lied, had hurt people, and was in prison because of it. They asked questions sometimes, hard questions that Marcus and Jennifer answered as honestly as they could. Why did Grandpa lie? Because he made bad choices. Does he still love us? We think so, but love isn't just a feeling. It's also actions, and his actions hurt people. Will we ever see him again? That's up to you when you're older. Right now, we're focusing on the people who are here, who love you and show up for you. Claire took her first steps in Mom's living room that Christmas, letting go of the coffee table and toddling 3 steps toward me before falling on her padded bottom. We all cheered, and she looked so proud of herself, clapping her little hands. These were the moments that mattered, I thought. These small, perfect moments of joy and love and family. Dad got out on parole after serving 18 months. I heard about it through Mom's lawyer, who thought we should know. He was living in a halfway house, working at a grocery store, trying to rebuild his life. He'd asked about visiting, about seeing his grandchildren, but Mom's lawyer had been clear. The family wanted no contact. He was to stay away. I wondered sometimes if that was cruel. He'd served his time, paid his debt to society in the legal sense. Didn't he deserve a chance at redemption? But then I'd remember those 5 months, remember watching him pretend to be helpless while Mom exhausted herself caring for him. Remember the fear in her eyes when she thought she was losing him. Remember counting out money from our savings account, money we'd been saving for our future, to help pay for his care. And I'd remember that some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Marcus was more absolute about it. He's dead to me, he said once, and his voice was flat, emotionless. As far as I'm concerned, my father died the night we found out the truth. This person who's out there now, he's a stranger. I have no interest in knowing him. Mom was somewhere in between. She didn't want to see Dad, didn't want him in her life, but she didn't hate him either. I pity him, she told me. He threw away everything for a fantasy that didn't even work out. He's alone now, really alone, and that's a consequence of his own choices. But I don't wish him harm. I just wish him gone from my life. Years passed. Claire grew into a bright, curious toddler, then a kindergartner, then a 2nd grader. She looked like me but had David's temperament, calm and steady and kind. She loved her grandmother, loved her Uncle Marcus and Aunt Jennifer, loved playing with Emma and Tyler when we all got together. She had a good life, a happy life, surrounded by people who loved her. She asked about her grandfather once. She'd heard Emma and Tyler mention him, had picked up on the fact that there was someone missing from our family story. "Where's your daddy?" She asked me one evening as I was tucking her into bed. How come I never met him? I'd known this question would come eventually. David and I had talked about how to handle it. We decided on honesty, age-appropriate honesty. My daddy made some very bad choices, I told her. He hurt people in our family, people we love. So he's not part of our lives anymore. Did he hurt you? Claire asked, her eyes wide and worried. Yes, I said. He did. But I'm okay now. We're all okay now. Will I ever meet him? She asked. Maybe someday, when you're older, if you want to, I said. But right now, we're focusing on the family we have. The people who are here and who love you. She seemed satisfied with that answer, and she snuggled down into her blankets. I love you, Mommy, she said, her eyes already closing. I love you too, baby, I said, and I sat there for a while, watching her sleep, thinking about family and love and the choices we make. Dad tried to reach out a few times over the years. Letters, mostly, which I didn't open. A card on Claire's birthday that I threw away. A message passed through a mutual acquaintance asking if we could meet, talk, try to rebuild some kind of relationship. I said no every time. Marcus said no. Mom said no. We were united in this, at least. The boundary was clear. I heard through the grapevine that he'd moved away eventually, left the state, started over somewhere else. Good, I thought. Maybe distance would help all of us. Maybe not seeing him around town, not worrying about running into him at the grocery store or the park, would make it easier to move on completely. Mom started dating someone seriously when Claire was 5. His name was Richard, and he was a retired teacher, kind and patient and nothing like Dad. He made Mom laugh, really laugh, in a way I hadn't heard in years. They took things slow, but it was clear they were good together. He treated her with respect, with genuine affection, and he never tried to replace Dad or insert himself into our family drama. He was just there, steady and supportive, and we all grew to love him. They got married in a small ceremony when Claire was 7. It was just family, close friends, nothing fancy. Mom wore a simple blue dress and looked happier than I'd ever seen her. Richard's kids were there, adults with families of their own, and they welcomed us warmly. It felt like a new beginning, a fresh start for Mom after so many years of pain. Claire was the flower girl, taking her job very seriously, walking down the aisle with careful steps, scattering petals with great concentration. Afterward, at the small reception, she sat on Richard's lap and asked him if he was her grandpa now. He looked at Mom, who nodded, her eyes shining with tears. If you'd like me to be, he said. I'd be honored. Yes, please, Claire said, and just like that, she had a grandfather again. Not a replacement for the one she'd never known, but someone new, someone who would show up for her, who would be present and honest and kind. I watched them together, Richard and Claire, and I felt something loosen in my chest. A tension I'd been carrying for years, a worry that Dad's betrayal had somehow damaged us all irreparably. But here was proof that we could heal, that we could build new relationships, that we could trust again. Marcus seemed lighter too. He and Richard got along well, bonding over their shared love of baseball and terrible dad jokes. Jennifer said it was good for Marcus to have a positive father figure in his life again, even as an adult. He'd been carrying so much anger, so much hurt, and Richard's steady presence seemed to ease some of that. Emma and Tyler called Richard Grandpa Rick, and he spoiled them appropriately, showing up to their school events and sports games, always ready with encouragement and praise. He was what a grandfather should be, I thought. present, supportive, honest. All the things Dad had failed to be. Life settled into a new normal. Years passed. Claire grew, Marcus's kids grew, and eventually Emma went off to college, then Tyler. Mom and Richard traveled, took cruises, visited national parks, made up for all the years Mom had spent in an unhappy marriage. She sent postcards from everywhere, her handwriting full of exclamation points and joy. I thought about Dad less and less as time went on. Sometimes months would pass without him crossing my mind. The wound had scabbed over, scarred, become part of my history but not my present. I'd learned to live with what had happened, to accept it as a terrible thing that had shaped me but didn't define me. Then, when Claire was 12, I got a phone call. A woman's voice, professional and sympathetic. She was calling from a hospital in Nevada. My father had been admitted. He'd had a heart attack, a real one this time, and he was asking for his family. My first instinct was to hang up. My second was to laugh at the bitter irony. A real medical emergency this time, after he'd faked one so elaborately years ago. But I didn't hang up, and I didn't laugh. I just stood there in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling nothing. Is he going to survive? I asked. It's serious, the woman said. He's stable for now, but the next 24 hours are critical. He's been asking for you, for his son, for his wife. He says he needs to see you. His wife divorced him years ago, I said. She's remarried. And his children, we haven't spoken to him in over a decade. He made choices that ended our relationship with him. There was a pause. I understand, the woman said. But I promised him I'd call. He's very insistent. He says there are things he needs to say. He had years to say things, I replied. He chose not to. I'm sorry he's sick. I genuinely am. But I can't help him. I hung up and stood there, my hands shaking. David came into the kitchen, saw my face, and immediately came to my side. What's wrong? He asked. I told him about the call. He listened, his face serious, and then he asked, "What do you want to do?" "Nothing," I said. "I want to do nothing. He's not my responsibility. He stopped being my father a long time ago." But even as I said it, I felt doubt creeping in. What if he died? What if these were his last hours, and I refused to see him? Would I regret it? Would I spend the rest of my life wondering what he'd wanted to say? I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring, and I told him about the hospital call. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, quietly, he said, "I'm not going. I can't. I won't." "I understand," I said. "I don't think I can either." "But you're thinking about it," Marcus said. "I can hear it in your voice. You're wondering if you should go. Aren't you?" I asked. "No," he said firmly. "I made my peace with this years ago. He's not my father anymore. He's just a man who shares my DNA. If he dies, I'll feel nothing. And I'm okay with that. I wished I could be that certain. But I wasn't. I was torn, pulled between the daughter I'd been, who'd loved her father unconditionally, and the woman I'd become, who knew exactly what he was capable of. Between the desire to protect myself from further hurt and the fear of regret. I talked to Mom. She was sympathetic but clear. "You have to do what's right for you," she said. Not what you think you should do, not what anyone else thinks you should do. What feels right for you. If you need to see him, to hear what he has to say, then go. If you need to protect yourself and stay away, then stay away. Either choice is valid. I talked to David, to Jennifer, to Richard even. Everyone said the same thing. It was my choice. My decision. No one could make it for me. I thought about Claire. She was 12 now, old enough to understand more of the story. She knew she had a biological grandfather she'd never met, knew he'd done something bad that had hurt our family. But she didn't know the details, didn't know the full extent of his betrayal. What would I want her to do, I wondered, if she were in my position someday? Would I want her to be hard, unforgiving, protected behind walls of justified anger? Or would I want her to be open to the possibility of closure, of hearing someone out, even if they didn't deserve it? I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. In the end, I decided to go. Not for Dad, but for myself. So I wouldn't spend the rest of my life wondering. So I could look Claire in the eye someday and tell her I'd given her grandfather one last chance to say whatever he needed to say. So I could close this chapter completely, with no lingering questions. I flew to Nevada the next morning. David offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something I needed to do alone. The flight was short, and I spent it staring out the window, watching the landscape change below me, trying to prepare myself for seeing Dad again after all these years. The hospital was small, clean, efficient. I gave Dad's name at the desk, and a nurse led me to his room. She warned me that he was weak, that I shouldn't stay long, that he needed rest. I nodded, barely hearing her, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the bright Nevada sun. Medical equipment beeped and hummed, monitoring vital signs, keeping him alive. And there, in the bed, was Dad. Except he didn't look like Dad anymore. He looked old, so much older than his 74 years. His hair was completely white, thin and wispy. His face was gaunt, skin hanging loose on bones that seemed too prominent. His hands, resting on top of the blanket, were spotted and trembling. He opened his eyes when I walked in, and I saw recognition there, followed by surprise, then something that might have been relief or joy or regret. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was weak, raspy. "You came. I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't," I said, staying near the door, not moving closer to the bed. "The nurse said you wanted to see me. That you had things to say." He nodded, a small movement that seemed to exhaust him. "I do," he said. "I have so much to say. I've been thinking about it for years, what I'd say if I ever got the chance. And now you're here, and I don't know where to start." "The beginning is usually good," I said, and my voice came out colder than I'd intended. He flinched, and I felt a small, mean satisfaction at that. Good. Let him feel uncomfortable. Let him feel a fraction of the pain he'd caused. "I was a coward," he said finally. "A selfish, stupid coward. I was unhappy, and instead of dealing with it like an adult, instead of talking to your mother or getting help or just asking for a divorce, I came up with this elaborate plan. I convinced myself I was clever, that I deserved to get what I wanted without consequences. And I destroyed everything." "Yes," I said. "You did." "I know sorry doesn't fix anything," he continued. "I know it's just a word. But I am sorry, Sarah. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. Not just because I got caught, not just because I ended up in prison and lost everything, but because I hurt you. I hurt Marcus. I hurt your mother. I hurt my grandchildren. I took your love and your trust and I used it as a weapon against you. And that's unforgivable. You're right, I said. It is unforgivable. He closed his eyes, and I saw tears leak out from under his lids, running down into the creases of his face. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did. I understand the magnitude of it. And I've spent every day since then wishing I could take it back, wishing I could be the father you deserved instead of the one you got. I stood there, watching him cry, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger, no sadness. Just a vast emptiness where my feelings for him used to be. Is that all? I asked. Is that what you needed to say? He opened his eyes, looking at me with something like desperation. Tell me about your life, he said. Please. Tell me about Claire. I heard you had a daughter. She must be, what, 12 now? 13? 12, I said. And no, I'm not going to tell you about her. You don't get to know her. You gave up that right. Please, he said, and his voice broke. I just want to know that you're happy. That you're okay. That I didn't ruin your life completely. You didn't ruin my life, I said. You hurt me, badly. You betrayed me in a way I didn't think was possible. But I healed. I built a good life. I have a husband who loves me, a daughter who's amazing, a family that's strong and honest and real. Everything you're not. He flinched again, but he nodded. Good, he said. That's good. I'm glad. You deserve that. I do deserve it, I said. We all did. And you took years of our lives, years we can never get back, and you used them for your own selfish purposes. So no, I'm not going to stand here and give you comfort. I'm not going to tell you it's okay, or that I understand, or that I forgive you. Because it's not okay. I don't understand. And I don't forgive you. I understand, he said quietly. I do. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me say what I needed to say. Even if it doesn't change anything. It doesn't, I said. Goodbye, Dad. I turned to leave, and his voice stopped me at the door. Sarah, he said. I did love you. I do love you. I know you don't believe me, and I don't blame you. But it's true. I loved you and Marcus more than anything. I just loved myself more. And that was my failure, not yours. I didn't turn around. I didn't respond. I just walked out of the room, down the hall, out of the hospital into the bright Nevada sunshine. I stood in the parking lot for a long time, breathing in the hot, dry air, feeling the sun on my face, and I waited to feel something. Relief, closure, sadness, anything. But there was still just that emptiness. I flew home that evening. Dad died 2 days later. The hospital called to inform me, and I thanked them for letting me know. I called Marcus, told him. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Okay. Thanks for telling me." And that was it. No tears, no grief, no sense of loss. Just acknowledgement that a chapter had finally, truly closed. We didn't go to the funeral. There was a funeral, apparently, arranged by some distant cousin we barely knew. But Marcus and I didn't go. Mom didn't go. We'd said our goodbyes years ago, in our own ways. We didn't need a ceremony to mark the end of something that had ended long before. I told Claire that her biological grandfather had passed away. She asked if I was sad, and I told her the truth. No, I said. I'm not sad. He wasn't really part of our lives. But I'm glad I got to see him one last time, to hear what he had to say. It gave me closure. What did he say? She asked. That he was sorry, I said. That he understood what he'd done was wrong. That he loved us, in his own broken way. Do you believe him? She asked, and I was struck again by how perceptive she was, how much older than her years. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe he did love us. Maybe he was sorry. But it doesn't change what he did. Love without respect, without honesty, without integrity, that's not really love at all. It's just a word. She thought about that for a while. Then she said, I'm glad I have Grandpa Rick. He's a good grandpa. He is, I agreed. He really is. And that was the truth of it. We'd lost something when Dad betrayed us, something we could never get back. The innocence of believing our family was solid, unbreakable. The trust that the people who loved us would never deliberately hurt us. The certainty that we knew the people closest to us. But we gained something too. We'd learned that we were stronger than we thought. That we could survive betrayal and come out the other side. That family wasn't just about blood, but about the people who showed up, who were honest, who loved us with actions and not just words. We'd learned to set boundaries, to protect ourselves, to choose who we let into our lives. Mom thrived in her marriage to Richard. They had 15 good years together before he passed away peacefully in his sleep at 82. Mom grieved him deeply, genuinely, in a way she'd never grieved Dad. Because Richard had been real, their love had been real, and losing him was a true loss. Marcus and Jennifer celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary. Their kids grew up, got married, had kids of their own. Marcus became a grandfather, and he was wonderful at it, present and engaged and everything Dad had never been. He'd broken the cycle, chosen to be different, to be better. Claire grew up strong and confident, with a clear sense of right and wrong and a low tolerance for manipulation or dishonesty. She studied psychology in college, fascinated by human behavior, by what made people do the things they did. I wondered sometimes if Dad's betrayal had influenced that choice, had planted a seed of curiosity about the darker aspects of human nature. But she was happy, thriving, building her own life on her own terms. David and I grew old together, the way it's supposed to happen. Slowly, gradually, with love and respect and honesty. We had our fights, our disagreements, our hard times. But we worked through them. We talked. We compromised. We never lied to each other, never manipulated, never betrayed. We'd both seen what that looked like, what it cost, and we'd chosen a different path. I thought about Dad sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep. I'd wonder what his life had been like in those final years, alone in Nevada, estranged from his family, living with the consequences of his choices. Had he been happy? Had he found whatever it was he'd been looking for when he'd blown up his life? Or had he realized too late that what he'd had, what he'd thrown away, was actually what he'd needed all along? I'd never know. And I'd made my peace with that. Some questions don't have answers. Some people remain mysteries even after they're gone. And that's okay. I didn't need to understand Dad to move on from what he'd done. I just needed to accept it, to integrate it into my story, and to keep living. Because that's what we do. We survive. We heal. We build new lives from the rubble of old ones. We learn to trust again, carefully, with boundaries and wisdom earned through pain. We choose who we let in and who we keep out. We protect ourselves and the people we love. And we keep going, day by day, moment by moment, building something real and honest and good. Not everything is what it seems. People can hide darkness behind familiar faces. Love can be twisted into manipulation. Trust can be weaponized. But knowing that, accepting that, doesn't mean we have to become cynical or closed off. It just means we become wiser, more careful, more intentional about who we give our hearts to. And in the end, that's the real lesson. Not that people are inherently bad or that trust is foolish, but that we have the power to choose, to set boundaries, to walk away from toxicity, to build families based on honesty and respect rather than obligation and blood, to heal from betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. Dad's betrayal didn't define us. It was part of our story, a painful chapter, but not the whole book. We wrote new chapters, better chapters, filled with real love and genuine connection and hard-won wisdom. We became people who valued honesty above comfort, who chose integrity over convenience, who understood that real love requires showing up, being present, telling the truth even when it's hard. I look at my family now, at Claire and her husband and their new baby, at Marcus and his grandchildren, at Mom in her 80s still vibrant and engaged with life, and I see what we built from the ashes of Dad's deception. We built something real. Something strong. Something honest. And that's worth more than any fantasy Dad chased, any manipulation he attempted, any lie he told. We survived. We healed. We thrived. And in the end, that's the best revenge, the best outcome, the best life. Not one free from pain or betrayal or loss, but one where we faced those things and came through them with our integrity intact, our capacity for love still strong, our ability to trust carefully restored. Not everything is what it seems. But some things are exactly what they appear to be. The love of a good partner. The joy of watching your children grow. The comfort of family that shows up, that tells the truth, that loves you with actions and not just words. The peace that comes from living honestly, from setting boundaries, from choosing yourself and your well-being over toxic relationships. Those things are real. Those things last. Those things matter. And in the end, those are the things that define a life well lived. Not the betrayals we survived, but the love we built afterward. Not the lies we uncovered, but the truth we chose to live. Not the family we lost, but the family we created, intentionally, carefully, with wisdom earned through pain. That's the story. Not just of what Dad did to us, but of what we did in response. How we chose to heal, to grow, to build something better. How we refused to let his betrayal poison our capacity for love and trust. How we learned to be wiser without becoming cynical, more careful without becoming closed off, more protective without becoming isolated. We learned that family is a choice, not just a fact of biology. That love is a verb, not just a feeling. That trust must be earned and maintained, not just assumed. That forgiveness is not required, that boundaries are healthy, that walking away from toxicity is not weakness but strength. And we learned that we are resilient, stronger than we knew. capable of surviving things we never thought we could survive, able to heal from wounds we thought were fatal, able to build new lives, new families, new stories from the ruins of old ones. That's what I want Claire to know, what I want her children to know, what I want to pass down through the generations. Not the story of how her grandfather betrayed us, though that's part of it, but the story of how we survived that betrayal. How we chose healing over bitterness, boundaries over revenge, truth over comfortable lies. How we built something real and lasting from the wreckage. Because in the end, that's the legacy that matters. Not what was done to us, but what we did in response. Not the pain we endured, but the strength we discovered. Not the family we lost, but the family we chose to become. Real, honest, present, loving in ways that are backed up by actions and integrity and truth. That's the story. That's the lesson. That's what endures long after the betrayal fades into memory, long after the pain dulls, long after the anger transforms into something quieter and more manageable. The knowledge that we can survive anything. That we can heal from anything. That we can build good lives even after terrible things happen. That we are stronger, wiser, more resilient than we ever knew. And that, in the end, is enough. More than enough. It's everything.